if you're thinking that way, then you're actually thinking like you're limited to the amount of creativity that you have.
Right.
But if you actually like, don't just like try to do it or change what you do, but you actually change the mentality and you're like, I'm a fountain. I can just create if I have constantly like the right people around me, and changing that up or working with the people that you really connect with.
Amazing. I'm Adam. Nice to meet you. I'm super excited to chat with you.
Nice. Thanks, Adam, for having me on.
Of course. Crazy. I have an older son who's 15 now and a younger one that's 7. And the older one's first concert was a Matisyahu show in San Diego.
Oh, that's awesome. At Belly
Yeah.
Up, or was it? Where was
n-
it?
It was actually at the Del Mar Fairgrounds.
Oh,
I believe
sick.
it's called the San Diego Fair now. It was like in 2014,
Yeah,
I
Del Mar.
believe.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Very cool.
yeah, I
Just
wanted to
grabbing a spoon real quick to mix
all
this.
good. Yeah. Take your time.
All right, cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. So, this is a podcast about you and your journey in music, and I want to talk to you obviously about the EP coming out, which I had a chance to hear, and is so good. I
Oh,
really,
thank you.
really like it. Yeah, my favorite song on the EP haven't released yet, so
Okay, cool. Which one, Lifeline or Love Supply?
"Love Supply." That song is
Mm,
so. I mean, the whole record is amazing, but that one just I don't know, I just love it.
cool. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. So I would start off with born and raised. I believe you're born in Pennsylvania. Is that right?
Yeah, I was born in Pennsylvania. We moved to Berkeley, California when I was like 6 months old, and
Oh
then
wow.
to Westchester, New York, when I was about 4 or 5.
Okay, so yeah, super young when you were
So
in
I grew up
in
in like
Berkeley.
yeah, I pretty much grew up in White Plains, New York. Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, I'm from San Diego originally. I live in Nashville now, but I spent about 5 years in the Bay Area doing radio. I used to do terrestrial radio. That's where I kind of got really into to you, and we used to play the live
Yeah.
version of King Without a Crown, which was
Yeah.
incredible. And you did this Oyster Fest thing in San Diego. We did a broadcast one.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, San
that
Diego
was good.
radio was always very, very cool to me. That was probably like San Diego and LA were where I got my start, really.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So how did you then kind of originally get into music? Come from a
Um,
musical creative house a little?
yeah, I'd say my parents are like music lovers, not
Okay.
musicians, but just I'm as a kid I remember just tons of music being on all the time, like really good music. And I remember feeling just feeling good whenever there was music on.
Mhm.
So in the 80s, so my mom's sort of a deadhead, so there was a lot of Grateful Dead, Neil Young, like that kind of era of music. But then, singer-songwriter stuff like Tracy Chapman and Ricky Lee Jones and Paul Simon Graceland, James Taylor, like was what was being played around the house. And then I guess at a young age, I just like I guess the first like melody I remember like ever like I remember hearing like melodies on commercials or in movies and stuff and being like feeling some like attraction to it. And the first one I remember is that classic line from Beverly Hills Cop. Bum,
Uh-huh.
bum, bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 bum,
Yeah,
bum. You
yeah.
remember that? I remember being like a little kid and hearing that and being like, whoa. Um, and then I got to see the Grateful Dead perform a couple times before Jerry Garcia passed away, and
Oh wow.
fell in love with Bob Marley, and then eventually some more reggae artists beyond Bob Marley. But that was really like the key for me. And then went to a Fish concert when I was 16, and that kind of like blew my mind. So I'd say like when I was around 16, 17 is when I knew that like I wanted to do music, but I didn't know exactly what or how because I didn't really play any instruments. So I had a drum set. My dad had some drums, so I set that up in the house with a microphone through a PA with like delay and reverb and stuff. And then I would just like play the drums and like chant. And then eventually I started getting like instrumental hip hop tapes and writing. And then I would just like practice like my flow into the microphone. And that's how I kind of got into the hip hop reggae kind of stuff.
Wow. I did read that you mentioned Fish. You became kind of one of the Fish fans. Did you like follow him around and stuff, or was
Yeah,
it?
yeah. I
That's
officially dropped out of high school after my first day of my senior year and got in a Volkswagen bus with a friend who had one and drove up to Burlington, Vermont to wait for tour to start and then jumped on the fall tour.
wow. So you just followed him around through that whole tour?
Yeah, just following him around, just, no no credit cards or anything like that from the parents, just like a bag of quarters and selling like whatever I could sell on the lot and kind of like find a crew of people like young kids like yourself and then you guys kind of go to the lot and everyone sort of does something different and at the end of the night you pool your money and maybe you get a hotel room or maybe you just get gas to the next show or whatever it is.
That's
Re-up
awesome.
the next one.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah,
was quite a
totally.
time.
How do
Yeah.
you like? Was that experience? I mean, I've just have always been so fascinated with that and the Deadheads and stuff. Where it comes to like getting into the show, where was it like they knew they had this cult following of people and they would just kind of like let the doors open to anyone, or did you have to find a ticket every show on the
You
whole
had to
tour?
find yeah, you had to find a ticket. And at that time it wasn't like I hadn't done mail order or like bought tickets prior or anything like that. So every day was like trying to find a way into the show. And I was successful. I was successful.
That's
Yeah.
incredible. So after kind
Yes.
of doing that tour, was that when you're like, wow, this is kind of what I want to do? Like this is what I
Yeah, I
want to take.
mean,
Yeah.
I think I had one experience where I had heard a guy in the park singing the Rastaman chant, like a hippie, like white kid from Georgia, with dreadlocks, and the way he like belted that song, I was just like, it like sort of struck a chord in me, and I felt like I could do it, and I don't think I even like practiced it that much, but I did it in front of somebody one time, and they kind of like their jaw dropped, and they were just like, bro, like that's insane, and Halloween Fish did Talking Heads that year at the Omni in Atlanta. And I kind of had like a bad trip and I lost my shoes in there and like I come out like barefoot and like distressed and I like went and I got my drum and I had like a djembe or whatever. And I go into this parking lot and there's like another guy playing and then me and him start jamming and he knows me. He had heard me sing this Rastaman chant before on tours, like in the parking lot or something.
Mhm.
So he goes like, sing it, and I start singing it. And like this drum circle gets bigger and bigger and bigger until there's like basically hundreds and hundreds of people. Like it turns into this eruption of like energy and hippies dancing and banging on the walls with sticks and it's just like insane. And I think I like and during that trip I had a moment where I was like, I don't know that just like everybody can do that. And I think that might be the thing that I can do. I can sing and my voice is like going to touch people. But and I kind of have a vision for this music of what kind of music I want to make. So, but I think I have this ability to like pull people together in that way. And so I think from that moment, yeah, I'd say is when I kind of knew that I wanted to do that.
Yeah, you definitely have like this. I mean, seeing you live, like this energy that you bring with you that kind of pulls everybody together. It's
Yeah.
really an incredible thing to watch. With those shows, I mean, was that kind of how you got your start? Like, was it more like an organic thing like that? Like you just kind of play out around people and then built kind of a name for yourself there? Or did you start in like trying to play clubs or?
Well, what happened then is like kind of like I went home from fish tour. I went to rehab upstate New York. Then I went back to tried to go back to high school. And then I went out on like a wilderness therapeutic program. I ended up in Oregon in like a halfway house kind of for a year
Mhm.
and performing in like open mic nights in like Bend. Sorry about that.
Oh,
I don't know why
okay.
this. Sorry.
No, all good.
Sorry, man. What the fuck? What the fuck? All right. Is that okay if
Oh
I
yeah,
stop?
perfect. Yeah, yeah, of course.
Can I
Um,
smoke weed on the podcast as well? Or
do whatever you'd like, man. This is all you and about you and your journey, man. I don't have any
so yeah,
regulations whatsoever.
so then I ended up staying in Bend, Oregon, and starting my first band. not as Matisyahu, but the first band that I was in, first rendition of it, and um, playing some gigs. And I ended up moving back to New York, going to school at the new school.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
yeah,
Yeah, I was looking when I was in college. I was always fascinated by that place. I wanted to go
yeah,
for like film and stuff.
yeah. It's a really cool place. I ended up meeting a lot of the musicians that I play with today, and I'm still friends with and tour with and travel and stuff. So, but while I was there, I would say I think it was like maybe my second year there is when I started becoming religious.
Mm.
And I wasn't from like a religious family, so Jewish, but not Orthodox or Hasidic. So that's when I started that exploration, and it ended me up in Crown Heights studying Torah, you know, in a yeshiva for a couple of years. And during that time, I didn't even really listen to music. I eventually um, I eventually went to Philadelphia and recorded a few demos, one of which was King Without a Crown.
Oh,
And
wow, really?
yeah, and Close My Eyes and Got No Water, those three songs. So I recorded those while I was still in Yeshiva, but eventually my kind of Matisyahu story starts there. So that other stuff is kind of all pre, you know, before.
Before you started Matisyahu, or before
Yeah.
Matisyahu. And
Yeah.
were those songs that you like King Without a Crown, were those songs that you had written uh for that project, or was this just you're kind of starting over
No,
again?
I had become like this other person, you know. I mean, it
Got
was like
it.
gone through this transformation and was coming out the other side, um and so there were some guys I knew from NYU Music Business School that started a record label, got a grant to promote Jewish music, and they kind of reached out to me in Yeshiva and asked me to sign a deal with them as my label. And they didn't have distribution or anything, but they started booking me shows in New York, opening up for people, different things, and got me some great opportunities and some great press. And and then it kind of took off from there. So yeah.
Is that the record that you put out on J-Dub Records that eventually what got picked up through Epic or something like that, or you got moved over? Or...
Yeah, that first record I sort of made while I was still in Yeshiva at the end, and it's called Shake Off the Dust to Rise.
Uh-huh.
And then I got signed through that record, but they wanted right away to put out a live album.
Oh,
Having seen
interesting.
my show before, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because to want to go right into doing a live record instead of having, a bunch of albums out with songs that people knew and then straight into like, oh, let's just put a live version out of this show or whatever. You go and do the Live at Stubs album.
Yeah, exactly. That was kind of
Wow.
cool. I mean, it was kind of genius in a sense. One sec, so closing this over here.
Yeah, go
It
ahead.
was it was kind of smart. The guy who was the A&R of that project, who had come and seen me, and he had seen me perform, I think, that morning on Carson Daly's show. Whatever show Carson Daly had at the time, it
Mhm.
wasn't TRL, it was after that. And then he saw me later that day perform at a yeshiva, like where I was doing something like for the kids, like on Rosh Chodesh at like 8 in the morning or something like that. And he saw the vibe and the live presence, and right away was like, we need to capture that on an album, you know. So it
And
worked.
what did you like? Why did you decide on a Stubs and having a show in Austin? Like, was that a place that you had been quite a bit before
No,
and had a
no,
fan base
no.
there, or no?
Again, that was all this A&R was like a top guy at Epic, and
Okay.
then just quit. Like
Oh, wow.
when he was like a president. Sorry about that, man. Let me put my
No,
phone on focus mode. Should have done that from the beginning.
don't worry, dude.
Okay. Okay.
It's a very laid back podcast.
I'm glad. Okay. So that A&R had VP level job at Epic, and was responsible for some really cool projects, and it had like, Missy Elliott, and when the Allman Brothers came back together, and just all types of different stuff. and he had just like quit, started his own indie label with another guy, and they had signed Los Lonely Boys,
Oh, wow. Okay.
who was out of Austin, Texas, and they had like huge success, and then made a deal with Epic where Epic could upstream whatever artists came through them, and I was the next artist to come through. So they were like, all right, the A&R was like, we don't want to put Matisyahu like at like the JCC and like, wherever. Like we want him in like a real music place. So it's pretty brilliant. And even like the marketing on it, you see like I'm in the Borsalino Hasidic, but it almost looks like a cowboy hat. Like there's
Yeah.
some kind of cool. And that's where we went. We went to Austin. I was on tour and we recorded the show, just one show there, on one of the early tours.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's just all one take, one show. And
Yeah,
the
we did do
success
we
of that was insane.
yeah, we did, to be, 100% truthful, we did replay like three or four songs at the end of the set so that we had like two options to choose from for like King Without a Crown and stuff. But yeah, it was just like a night on tour. Yeah, it was
Oh
just
my
like
gosh.
a night. We didn't even know it was like there was a truck there and we had in-ears and there was all these people and people mixing it, and we're just like, wow, I remember that. I remember that day.
That's so cool. That's so wild, especially since it was a place like, Austin, Texas, where you wouldn't really imagine, like, if you hadn't really been there to just be like, oh, this thing's happening, and then fill the room and then capture this moment that has been so inspirational to so many people, and the amount of records that has sold, and then to have a live version become like the radio single. I mean, when I worked at 91X in San Diego, we were playing the live version of King Without a Crown. Like,
Yeah.
that's just something that is so unheard of.
It was magical. I remember the radio guy who's kind of a famous guy in the industry named Danny Bush. A lot of people know, you probably know him if you
Mhm.
worked
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
radio. But I remember him, his strategy was like he would play the record for people, and they would love it, and then he would say like, all right, now here's who's singing it, and then show them a picture. People would be like, how the fuck is this? And
Yeah.
then it's also a live song, it's a live song. And so the success of that record was like, kind of miraculous. So it was just different, it was its own thing.
Mhm. I
A
mean, I
lot of
can't really
people
think.
stood, a lot of people stood behind it, like yourself, like a lot of radio support for that record, like the most, obviously that I ever had. So it was like just people just fell in love with the record. They were just like, I want to play it. I want to play this. It's cool.
Yeah, there's something so magical about what you captured in that live version of the song that's like, wow. I mean, we were playing it, they still play it to this day. I mean, it's lived so long in this cool way. Like, I can't think of another real live version, maybe like a Cheap Trick or something that has like a live version of a song that kind of
Yeah.
became like a big, so big as the
Yeah.
single.
And even like probably the biggest mistake the record company made was to re-record that song for the record, and then release it. When they released like the recorded version of King Without a Crown, I think Stubs was selling like 30,000 albums a week,
Uh-huh.
so it's like
Yeah.
everyone loved the live one, leave it alone, you know, and
Right.
leave it alone, and then I think when they made a recorded version, a lot of radio promoters and stuff were like, well, the magic is on the live one, and now we see what the label is doing. They're trying to make it something else, which wasn't necessarily the case. We had Bill Laswell producing, and the recorded version is sick as fuck. I love it,
Oh, yeah.
uh, but yeah, it was weird to release. It's weird to release a recorded version on top of a live version when the live version is doing so well that the record label can't even believe that it's doing that well. Like it can't be. This song can't go top 40, right? But it was starting to. It was
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, no, and if you think about records then, nowadays you can make a record on your computer, right? I mean, the
Sure.
amount of money people were putting into producers and recording albums at the time, and to have, I'm sure it was way cheaper to just do the live show at Stubs and have it, and then to have that thing do so well, it's like, whoa, like not only Was it not this big production in months upon end that you're putting really into just the
It
tracks and
costs next
songs?
to nothing to make. If they
Yeah,
had
that's
just
what I
left
mean.
it at
Like,
that from a
yeah,
business model, from just a business standpoint,
that's crazy.
if they had left it at that, how wealthy we would all be.
I read that like going into Light, it was kind of, it was definitely a change for you as far as like sonically, right? A bit.
Going into that next album after Youth.
Yeah, yeah, after Youth.
Yeah, that was sort of like it was this old school manager with this old school perspective that was like, okay, you just kind of like exploded, you came out on the scene, you did your thing, now go away.
Mhm.
That used to be the strategy.
Oh, it wasn't like having to try to
Now
get
go,
another hit and like try to
no,
move. Yeah.
no, put out another
Really?
song, put out another release. That's the biggest shift, I think, from those days to these days in the music industry. I mean, it's a big one that not a lot of people talk about because it's not the obvious one, but the idea that you kind of step back and then come back in a few years, and that
Hmm.
was like the stupidest fucking thing in the world, because even at that point, it was like people are already moving on quick. So I took a lot of time to make that record. I made the record with David Kahn, who's meticulous. You sit in the basement with him, and he like adds layers and layers and layers and changes, and it took us, I think, 8 months to make that record, something like that. And
Wow.
I started the record out by like Epic got me a room at the pencil factory in Greenpoint. I don't know if you know, it was like an old pencil factory that became a bunch of lofts.
No,
I
that's
ended up
amazing
meeting,
though.
yeah, I ended up meeting like a bunch of artists like Adam Deitch and Eric Krasnow, people that Stu Brooks that I play with over the years. Everyone kind of had a room in there, and it was before that area was really built up. It was kind of on its way, just north of Williamsburg.
Hmm.
And yeah, so Epic got me a writing room there, and I would go there. People would come, different artists or producers, and hang out for a few days, and we would record stuff. And then I would take all that to David, literally on my bicycle. I would like ride my bike from there over the bridge to David's studio in like Meatpacking District, and sit with him, and then we would kind of like try to put it all together into songs, and it was just like a long, really like long process, a lot of detail, and not how I like to make records now,
Right.
so. And then yeah, so that was like quite a few years like before that, and I also like on the writing tip, I was on a kind of a new place too. It was like my philosophical uh what I was learning, and I was learning a lot at the time, was kind of like starting to branch out into new worlds. So, so that was going on as well. Yeah.
Mhm. And with the, I mean, going into that album a couple of years later, were you worried, or was it nothing you even thought about as far as like, were people going to stay on board, or, continue
Well,
to
at
move
that
forward with you?
point,
Yeah. Like, are you
so
worried
that
about
was
what
like
this?
already were like the difference in those years between like 2005, 6 to 2010 is like that's like a key moment in music industry. Those 5 years, probably like there's a huge transition there. So by the time we finished Light and handed it in, which was essentially the story of the Seven Beggars by Rabbi Nachman, who's like this Breslov Hasidic rabbi who stopped teaching Torah and started telling stories. And I had started studying these stories with this rabbi, and we were like dissecting them. And the whole album had this whole, like, basically the form of the Seven Beggars. Epic had gone through changes. They had hired this woman who was like a songwriter, essentially, had like big hits. And she listened to the album, felt it had been overproduced and that there wasn't any hits on the album. And so asked me if I would go back in with another producer to write um, some hits that they could like add to the album, and they would take off a few songs from the album.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of artists would have been like, "Fuck you,"
Yeah.
no way.
Yeah.
But I was like, all right, like I've always been kind of like, I'll try something, If it had turned out that I didn't like those songs, I probably would have fought with them about what songs should be on the album. But I was open to like the session.
So did you
And,
end up then recording re-recording some of the songs for the album at all and keep
well,
any of those or no?
Yeah, I had been on tour with an artist named Kanon who had this song that I was listening to every night called Waving Flag. It was like, when I get older, I will be stronger. They'll call me freedom, just like
Oh,
a waving flag.
oh, I know that song. Yeah.
Right. So that song eventually was used like couple years later for the World Cup, and it became a big
Uh-huh.
song. When he was playing it on tour, it wasn't even like the label didn't even know that that was a hit. I remember like speaking to one of the A&Rs being like, this is a massive song. And they're like, oh yeah, well, we'll see. And like he recorded it, played me a version of it at some point on tour. So when Amanda Ghost, the head of Epic at that time, said, will you go record another song? I said, yeah, can you find out who produced uh Waving Flag by this artist named Kanon, this Canadian artist? She goes, it happens to be that the A&R that I'm bringing in to be your A&R now, because when the president comes in, they bring their own people. So a lot of people got fired. She brought her people in. The new A&R from Matisyahu is the manager of this group called the Schmeezingtons, this production group, and the Schmeezingtons produced that song for Kano, and he manages them. A week later, I was on a plane and I was recording One Day with the Schmeezingtons. So who's the
Wow.
Schmeezingtons? The Schmeezingtons is three guys, like a kid from Teaneck who's like the engineer, another producer who you probably don't know who it is, and then another producer who was trying to get a record deal at the time but couldn't get a record deal, and for years had been like struggling trying to get a record deal, was writing for other artists and stuff. So who do you think that producer was? Do you know the story?
I don't. I'm
A lot of
excited to
people
hear it.
don't. So I've started getting better at like telling it or like drawing it out.
Okay.
It
No,
was
I want to hear it because I didn't.
Bruno fucking Mars.
Oh man. Okay.
So
That is wild. I
I
was
come
wondering
back
because he
from
had a
LA.
writing credit on that song, I believe, from what I was
He,
reading it. I
he
just
might
totally
yeah.
lost my mind.
Yeah.
I
I
do
come back
remember
from
that.
from LA from that trip with One Day, and that became for me probably the biggest song of my career.
Oh yeah. And then speaking of,
Yeah.
having the song for the World Cup, yours was going to be at the Olympics, right?
It was
Was
yeah,
like
it was
that's
used by NBC for the NBC spot for the Olympics,
that's so
2010. Yeah.
that is wild. I mean, obviously, the right move going with those producers, and it's crazy the whole, concept of like, oh, I really like this song. Who produced it? And then you do that with One Day, and it's this massive song, also syncing with similar, you know,
Yeah.
the World
It's
Cup.
what Bruno does. I went to
Yeah.
Bruno Mars and I was like, I want my waving flag, I want my no woman, no cry. He's really good at like knowing like different genres and how to like capture the like essence of what that song is. He can recreate. It's crazy.
I wonder if
Yeah.
that kind of broke him into the industry because of the success of that song.
I don't think so. I don't
Oh,
think the song blew up yet, or I don't think even a lot of people didn't know about that. He got his record deal. He was gonna get that deal, you know.
okay.
And then once he did, he was so talented, on so many levels. Like he's not just an artist or a singer. He's like producer, a writer, he's businessman, like knew smart dude, like hustler. So all those things combined, he was like going to the top when he got his shot. There was no question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And then you ended up doing another Stubs record as well, right?
I
Like,
did, yeah.
yeah.
I did a live at Stubs too. This time we did it outside, and I did that. At that point, I had changed up my sound. I had gone with another band called the Dub Trio from Williamsburg, and they were kind of like not the guys from my original band were from the new school. I had gone to school with them, and these guys were a band that I really admired, who had like they played instrumental dub essentially, and they also kind of were leaning towards like rock with dub elements, and it was all instrumental. And I would found myself writing lyrics to their music because it was instrumental and it was like so dope.
Mhm.
And eventually we became kind of close, me and the bass player. And he's like one of my best friends now. But at the time, we became close. We did some songs together. We did the Save Darfur album. We did a John Lennon song, Watching the Wheels, and they were the band. And we did a couple things together. And then we did a show at like the Bell House or something in Brooklyn. and we didn't like rehearse. We just played dub trio songs with me spitting Matisyahu lyrics over them.
Oh
And
wow.
it was epic. It was like an epic show. And they ended up becoming my band. So at that point was like Live at Stubs 2 was like for me, it was like, okay, the sound has changed, quite a bit. And I want to showcase that. And, so it was kind of cool to go back, with that, in a different space than the first time.
Yeah. Did you utilize those guys on Sparkseeker
Uh,
or no? Or just
no,
at that moment? Oh,
actually, yes, the guitar player David Holmes wrote the guitar line for Sunshine, like probably my
really?
biggest song. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, actually, David was involved in the writing of that song, maybe one or two other ones, but not as much Stu on that one. Stu produced the Akada album, so the Akada album was like me and Stu and Dave, Joe a little bit, but a lot of just me and Stu. You know.
Okay. Okay.
The Spark Seeker record was produced by Kojak, who's from like the Dr. Luke camp,
Hmm.
and that was made in California, and it was also a one-on-one experience, very very different, like the opposite extreme from working with David. Kojak is like an artist. He was a rapper in a Brazilian band, and fun guy, and like just chill, and just like the most relaxed kind of like cool person to work with, in the sense of like just enjoying yourself and just having a good time.
Uh-huh.
Whereas like the work with David is like very focused, and you're in this like hole in this basement in New York City in the winter. Kojak's like on the mountain in Hollywood, and it's just like a whole different, humble, not like in some big place, but just a whole different era of my life. And I think you can feel a drastic difference on those two records. And the Spark Seeker record is definitely um it's like a sense of joy to that record, I think, for sure.
Yeah. And with that record, was that I think I read that you recorded some of it in Tel Aviv. Was it the first time you had recorded music outside, actually in Israel?
I had recorded some music in Israel before, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, early in my career, one guy just paid me money to go like into his bomb shelter and just record songs, like write and record songs, and then he still got them.
Oh my gosh. That's wild.
He paid me like by the hour, like shekels. You know what I'm saying? And I was like about to get married. I was like, all right, yeah, I'll fucking do this.
Yeah.
And every day I would be like, we good? He'd be like, we'll stay another day. And they'd just like bring food and water.
And then you just hang out there. He'd pay you by the hour to write songs.
Yeah, for like days.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
but but yeah, so me and Kojak worked, like East Hollywood. It was like right by like what's that spot? Whatever. I can't fucking remember any of
It's
the
all
names
good.
of these places where I
Yeah,
where I
yeah.
lived in LA. But so we worked up there, and we had a great time. And in the whole record we made, it was the two of us. It was like his beats, me singing, us working together on harmonies and figuring out cool percussion things that we'd bang around. And but essentially it was just like sometimes you make a record and there's like, it could be hundreds of people involved. Sometimes you make a record, it's like you and one person. And
Mhm.
that was pretty much what we had. At the end of it, it was like great. We loved it. It was fun. It felt like edgy in terms of like, it felt like it was very current. It felt like it was hip hop and like all these cool things, but with these huge hooks and melodies, and very pop for me, probably like the most pop records that I had made up to that point,
Oh yeah.
even more than One Day in a sense.
Mhm.
Um, kind of danceable. And he went on, he did who was the big one that he did was what's her name? What, I can't remember. Artist of the Time, great artist, with like may have had some huge songs. Anyway, whatever. Um, basically, at the end we listened to all that, and then we're like, all right, but this is really kind of strays from like the Matisyahu thing. Like, whereas we had shofars, we had like rabbis, but there was something about it that felt like it needed like something more organic, something more Jewish. And I was like, let's go like Middle Eastern, and let's go to Israel. Let's get some money from the label and have a field trip. and go like stay on the beach in Tel Aviv and rent a studio and have my homie in Israel hook up like the best, most badass motherfucking musicians in Israel that there are, which there's a lot of badass players. And so that's exactly what we did. We had a studio in Jaffa, and we just like every day went to the studio, and we would just have cats come through, and we would just play the tracks and have them lace the tracks, percussionists, oud players, like whatever, you name it. Like, and then eventually we just took all that, blended it into the record, and that's how we made it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow.
It was
Wow.
fun.
Wow.
One of the funnest trips ever of my life.
That's amazing. And you put that out. Did you put that on your, was that like kind of your first record that you put on your label
Uh yeah,
with
that's
Falling
true. That was
Sparks?
it. That was
Yeah.
after I had been dropped from Epic. Yeah.
And
That
then
was
going into, I mean, that was another big album for you though, too. That's crazy to be like,
Sunshine is like one of my hugest songs, and I own the master. It's like a whole different story.
probably the best thing that
Whole
ever happened to you as far
yeah,
as that goes.
whole different story. Yeah, it's absolutely true. Because also most of my publishing reverted to me, which I didn't even know was a thing after I got dropped. So like when you sign a deal when you're young, and especially at that time, you would sign away your publishing as well.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. And then I got dropped, and all of a sudden I'm like, got my publishing back. And no one even fucking knew that. It's crazy. I didn't get the publishing back for certain songs, like One Day and stuff, but, a lot of it. Anyway, but Spark Seeker, and that was a fun record to make. And Kojak is the homie to, we've always been, he's just stand-up, great guy. Good
Yeah. I was
dude.
looking up who it might be. Was it Kesha at the time?
Kesha, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was good. I was like, I need to figure out who this is for you. You
Yeah.
aren't like,
I mean, at that time, Dr. Luke had like taken over radio. I mean, and he was like every artist was either his producer, it was like Benny Blanco,
uh-huh.
Kojak, or like the artists, all the artists you were hearing on the radio and stuff were those artists. But Kojak was just dope. We just had a good time, man. He was
Yeah.
cool. He came with me. We did all kinds of shit together. We threw the like opening pitch together at Dodger Stadium. We were in Tel
No
Aviv together.
way.
We went back and shot the video for Sunshine. We went back and shot it. It was cool.
That is cool. That is really cool. And then so from there on forward, I mean, with Acadia and Undercurrent, the album
So
you put out 2 years ago, like those were all out on your own label then, right? Including this
yeah,
new one.
yeah, yeah. Akada, I ended up doing it with the original A&R who did Live at Stubs. I ended up trying to work with like a lot of the people that originally I had worked with sort of later. That one didn't go so well because he like literally just ran off and didn't like account or pay anybody for the entire like 7-year term that he had the record.
Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah, but that being said, it's my favorite album that I made, like hands down, I think,
Really? And
yeah. And
why would you say that? I'm just curious.
well, I guess at that point I was going through a lot. Like I think I was starting to go through my divorce, and I was going through um I was touring like a lot because I found myself in this spot where I was just like workaholic, like didn't want to turn down any shows or tours, and not happy, I guess, at home to some extent, and
Mhm.
um also like just wanting to work on the craft. Like I just wanted to make the music better and just keep getting better. And I kind of like really kind of drove myself down a hole with that to some extent. And then like kind of breaking out of the religion, too. There was like this crazy freedom. And like long stints of that time, I was sober, and I was like doing yoga and eating macrobiotic and just like becoming a channel, and I would have these kind of ups and downs during that period. But so as an artist, it was like just like so raw. Life was very, very raw and just coming at me. And I felt I was able to channel to my best ability, like all of that into that album and those songs. And I was doing it with like my best friend, like who was this guy Stu, the bass player for Dub Trio, who during all that time on the road and being away from kids and just feeling isolated in so many different situations, he kind of became like my best friend and someone that I felt like was watching and paying attention and cared. He's a
Mhm.
triple cancer,
Oh wow. Yeah.
And like one of the most badass players and just beings that I know. And so I made that whole album basically just me and him together. So, we had the other guys involved, and they were writing, and they were around at sessions, and even Dave came and stayed with me. At some point we all wrote together in like the back house on like in like Hancock Park, in the house that I was living in with the family. Um, it was just like a really intense period of time. The time period when, like, right before I became religious, when I was trying to make the decision of like, is this the truth? Like, because everything else in my life up until now is like, you do stuff, but you don't give yourself over really like a hundred
Right.
percent to
Yeah.
anything, like beyond even your own logic, and
Mhm.
that is kind of a dangerous thing to do. That's when you get into like fundamentalism and all kinds of like crazy shit. It's like you allow the idea of the thing to somehow take over beyond your own like reasoning, and that's somehow considered to be like holy, right?
Yeah.
So it's this like process of like completely like losing yourself. um and why were we talking about that? Sorry, I
Oh
lost
no, no,
track.
we were just talking about Akada and like that
Mm.
moment, or yeah, how that
Oh yeah,
became
yeah.
this album.
So that decision to be religious wasn't just like, oh, let me put on a hat or have a beard or even move to Crown Heights or study tour. It was like, no, I'm taking all this on. It's the only way. Very,
Mhm.
very hard to make those kind of decisions in your life that are like that drastic. And Akeda was the same thing on the reverse. It was like Abraham going up to the mountain, with Isaac, and now this was like the sacrifice and then the walk back down the mountain. And for me, that was like another massive moment for me, where it was like, okay, I'm reclaiming my face.
Yeah, because that's when you shaved, right, and
Yeah,
everything.
exactly. It was like
Uh,
very literal even. It was like,
yeah.
it was like very much just like I'm getting rid of everything extra, right? Like I said, I
Mhm.
went like macrobiotic, like no sugar, no caffeine, no nicotine, no weed, no alcohol, no all of the things, but not in a way where I had done it before, like in yeshiva or rehab or different ways at different times, in a way where I was just like stepping into the light,
Mhm.
and actually feeling it by chewing fucking rice, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't need all this religion and like all these things. Like I can sit here in a room, like my baby on the rug playing, and eat a bowl of rice and chew this motherfucker 30 times, per,
Oh yeah, for
and just get
swallow or
all
whatever.
and just be like in a super zone, and clear ideas and all that. A lot of that happened because I ended up getting like a cyst on my vocal cord from like the intensive touring, like pushing,
Uh-huh.
pushing, pushing every night, 12 nights in a row, night off, 14 in a row, night off, 18 in a row, night off. That's how my tours looked.
Oh my
Like
gosh.
there would be like 6 nights off on a like 3 month tour, 4 month tour, you
Yeah.
know.
That's wild.
And
Yeah, I
and I
always
started
see
playing on
that.
Shabbos, so I was just like, fuck it, I'm gonna run with this and just play as much as I can.
Oh,
And
is that when that on that around that time is when you decided to do that? Because I think, yeah, I was reading something that where you before it was like you played only one show because of like it was like in Alaska, right? And it was like it was
oh yeah,
technically
yeah, yeah.
not night yet. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Prior to that, that was the one Shabbos shoot, right, right. But yeah, man. So that was Akeda. That was just just an intense time for me. And then after Akeda, I moved home from LA. My ex wanted to move back to the East Coast.
Mhm.
So we moved back to the East Coast. I bought this like big old haunted house on the
Oh,
Hudson
wow.
River. Yeah, about, in this town called Nyack, just, by the Tappan Zee Bridge. And and I just posted up there, and that's when I wrote the Undercurrent album. And the Undercurrent is like Akeda is the story of Abraham, bringing
Going
Isaac, his son, up
yeah,
onto the
yeah.
mountain.
Mountain, yeah.
So if that period of time for me was like mountains, climb was like climbing this fucking mountain. It's like being up on the top of this mountain in terms of like the intensity of everything. And then there's always like the question of, so what happens after that moment, when as a person, like when you have this intense kind of situation.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like undercurrent. It was like there's the undercurrent is like the undercurrent of who you are pulls you back somehow into your kind of original self.
Yeah.
And that was what this period was for me. And I literally moved across the river from where I grew up, across the street from a lighthouse, from a picture that I took in fourth grade, of a
Whoa.
lighthouse, And so I kind of like moved back, and I found myself kind of like less concerned with Judaism and being Jewish, less concerned with religion, less concerned with God, in the sense that like I feel like God has had like enough of me already. Like he wants a break from me. I want to. We need a break from each other a little bit. Like the whole idea that every day and all these things are all concerned with like with God. Like I like kind of let go of that. So what are the things I like? I like watching football. Why? Because my dad watched football on Sundays. I like fucking bagels and lox. I like my motorcycle. I like, my kids. I like playing the drums. I'm gonna set up the drums, like kind of coming back to this Matthew Miller of who I was before this whole entire Matisyahu thing. And I
Mhm.
think that's kind of what that album was for me. And then it kind of ended it for me in a pretty dark place. I mean, because I became like addicted to drugs that I had never, messed with before.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I started falling apart and started falling apart on tour, getting through the shows and stuff, but just in a very, very kind of like dark place.
Yeah.
And
I've I was thinking like a lot when you're talking about, giving everything over because I've been sober for a couple of years now and I've been in AA and the same thing, like you have to give everything over to this higher power, right? Like you just you take this from me type deal. Like it's an interesting concept. I was kind of
mhm,
thinking about that when you were talking earlier.
many
Yeah.
times in many different ways. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, becoming religious is like for sure that, and living in a religious life. And then, all you can do that in so many ways for sure.
Mhm.
Um, But yeah, for me at that point, it kind of funny because the undercurrent for me was like after letting go of like all these rules and feeling like really strong and being on top of the mountain and all of that, and even being sober and all of that,
Mhm.
you know, um, was like there was this pull that like brought me back as I like did. And once I did, I kind of had like already let go of all these rules. So I was kind of like, okay, I'm in the freedom zone right now. I'm
Right.
divorced and there's no one like watching my back or telling me what to do, and I'm a full grown man with money and and like great like music and all of that. I get to go do all this stuff, and I started to kind of go to like the lowest place to some extent for
Mhm.
me. It wasn't like for me. It was like I'm the type to like I would get fucked up and then I would just go like sit in my bus. I wouldn't want to see anybody. I wouldn't want to
Yeah.
go anywhere,
Just
and I would just
isolate.
like
Yeah.
isolate and just fucking roll in my shit, and it
Mhm.
was like dark and painful, and then I would go out on stage and I would like put all that out there and try to redeem it, and oftentimes would end the shows like in this ecstatic place with the crowd. And had gone through that process, but sometimes it was just dark. I just couldn't even open my eyes. I couldn't even look at the crowd. I just felt so like toxic.
Yeah. And was that
Uh,
after you had released Undercurrent at that time, and it was kind of the next step in
yeah, it was around that time.
oh, man. And then
And
what sorry, go ahead.
then I ended up meeting my wife, and I met this like young woman from Miami in a random way. And we just stayed like in touch on the phone, and I would call her and she would call me and we would talk. And like she was basically just like I was like, well, she just moved in. And then we just like that was it. We've been together for 7 years. We have
Incredible.
yeah, we have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, SD River and Judah Mac, both born at home births.
Wow.
Yeah. And she like saved my life, She just like fucking helped me do what I needed to do at that time,
Mhm.
which was really hard. So, you know, and now it's like a team situation. It's like, something I didn't really understand before because I had been like very much alone for I think most of my life. I'd been kind of doing my thing and you know, got into this situation where, you know, you're really a part of a family. You know, then I got my boys are around, the teenagers, they're making music, and
Yeah, I saw that. That's really one your oldest is gonna put put an album out last year or was going to?
yeah, he put out an album. He put out a few songs, and his younger brother Sean's putting out music, about to start putting out music and coming out on tour with me.
That's
And
so cool.
yeah, it's kind of becoming like a rite of passage. Like when you turn 17, you drop out of school and go on tour with dad, you know, and you have to have your first song out. You know, some younger brother said, he's like, well, Lady did it. I'm fucking doing it. Um, but yeah, so yeah, it's been quite a road. So that Matisyahu album after Undercurrent
Uh-huh.
was, I've never done this before, like walk through the albums with someone like one by one. It's cool.
I
Um,
appreciate you doing this,
that
man. This is so
is,
cool. Like
yeah.
yeah, I really appreciate it.
So that Matisyahu album is like a sort of a joyful album again. It's like I'm with my wife. I'm pretty much sober, to some extent, you know, what they call California
I was
sober,
gonna
whatever.
say you're California
Yeah.
sober, it sounds like.
Or at that point at least. And I've got my first baby. My wife loved this song that I had put out called "Carry Me" and another one called "Unraveling." I had done two tracks like in between albums. You know, I did like
Mhm.
"Love Born" and "Shade from the Sun." I released some music myself. I ended up managing myself like when I was like sober. I like started managing myself and releasing some tracks and singles. And then basically, so yeah, so I was living in Nyack. I'm living on the river, you know, and I have my wife and a new baby, and you know, just trying to during, I think going, it was COVID, and
Yeah, I was gonna say,
she's
I think COVID was going on,
yeah,
like,
and
prior, probably when you were writing that album.
exactly in the writing leading up to it, and then my baby was born March 20th, 2020.
No way! Okay,
Yeah,
just because you said that, my first son, the whose first concert was you, was his birthday is March 20th, 2008.
no fucking way.
I swear to God, that's
Fucking
so
dope.
crazy.
um Yeah, my sorry, I fell off track, but my
No,
wife
that's
says,
amazing.
I love these tracks you did, like who produced these tracks? And I'm like, there's this like duo from Colombia that lives in Brooklyn called Salt Cathedral. She's like, why don't you reach out to them and see if they'll come to the house during COVID? You know, and other people that I had worked with before were gonna come and they couldn't come, they wouldn't come. So I reached out and they were like, yeah. And they came to the crib and we made that album at the crib, like during COVID. I think it was like summertime. It's
Uh-huh.
beautiful, you know, and you can feel it. That's like kind of joyful album, and just like kind of in a kind of complete place, you know, to some extent, you know, kind of like yeah,
Yeah, and I love how the album ends too with, like, it kind of with "When the Smoke Clears," it's just kind of like this.
yeah,
Or no, it's the that's towards the end of the album. I don't think that's maybe not the
yeah,
last
yeah.
track.
No, I like that
Yeah,
though.
yeah, I love how I think "Rain Dance" is awesome, but, like,
Rain
just
Dance,
yeah,
yeah,
how it just kinda end it's yeah,
yeah.
I think that's such
I
a great record.
I have to dive back into it. Like, there's usually a period of time where I'll like make a record, I'll listen to it a little bit, even after it comes out, I might just to be able to play it. And then at some point I stop listening to it. And like that was a good reminder that Rain Dance is probably one of my favorite tracks on that album for sure.
That's a great song, and then going into this EP you have coming out, next month, very beginning of next month, so in a few weeks from now.
Yep.
When do you start working on this? Kinda tell me about the origin of the EP, what it's about and everything about it.
So during COVID, like no touring and stuff, I sold my house, I sold my cars. I moved to Teaneck, which is where my ex lives. So it's like closer to the kids' schools and stuff.
Mhm.
And I made um this last group of songs. I started, I think it was like maybe February, and it probably went through the summer. I
Okay.
don't think I was touring much. And I worked with this for the first time with this group called Song Camp. And basically it's like they have a network of like producers, beat makers, writers, hook writers, rappers, what engineers, whatever, across the country, New York, LA especially. And you basically like make a video, send in songs, and like this is the kind of music I'm trying to make. These are the artists I'm listening to. These are the kind of drums I want. This is what the album is about. This is the concept. They send it out to like their whole network. And then
Mhm.
whoever's like interested or who they think will match up well, they match you up with. And you just
Wow.
write some together. Yeah. And sometimes it might be like you and another person on Zoom. And sometimes it was like 7 dudes at the crib, like making music. And and everyone contributing and everyone. So it was a super cool experience for me because it was the first time, I've done songs like I have a song Live Like a Warrior where someone else wrote it, and sent it to me.
Mhm.
And so I have a couple songs like that. But this is like the first time where I was working with not just the musicians or producers or people who do the stuff that I don't do, but people who do what I do. And us kind of like just balling, like back and forth, like throwing lines out, like working off each other. And it's kind of cool. I think you feel it on the album. I think you can feel this collaborative thing, and I think you'll feel like the flow. And even for me, it's like my flow. It's modest, but you'll feel there's like different moments in it where it's kind of changes up in a
Mhm.
different way. The music is based on the music that I was like really heavy listening to at the time, which was basically Afro pop.
Mhm.
A few artists in particular, and basically I was trying to kind of get that vibe with the modest thing, with what I do, you know.
Yeah, I think it's an incredible EP. Like I said, my early on, Love Supplier is my favorite song on it, but I think the whole thing's awesome. I love the video you post on your Instagram of you doing Fireproof. Um, you're collaborating with someone and you've got, he's doing the backups and you're kind of going back and forth and you got
Oh,
that,
cool.
yeah, that trigger thing and that I don't know the name of
Mhm.
it, but you guys are just throwing
You're
stuff
talking
down.
about Ami. I know who you're
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah. Such a rad video.
Yeah, yeah. So actually, yeah, like it wasn't just Song Camp. Actually, there's a lot of producers I worked with that weren't in Song Camp, like Ami, that just I made connections with. I let my managers know that I was trying to work with a lot of different people, and I ended up working with a bunch of different people. So it's really cool. I think I made like about 38 songs that I stand behind, like every single one of them.
Wow.
I'm not the type of artist to make like a bunch of songs and like throw them away. I'm kind of like it happens from time to time, but like I made 38 songs, I think. So these are like the first five that I guess that we felt would do well and like connect with people. But there'll be like a steady stream of music that I'm gonna be doing, like sort of like the opposite of that go away idea, and
Mhm.
just keep releasing music, um, as much as I can.
I love that, man, and I love the
Yeah.
5 songs that you have coming out, and
Yeah.
I'm
And it's
excited
a
to
it's
hear.
a different mentality in terms of making music too. The other mentality of like, okay, there's a time for touring, there's a time for living, there's a time for writing, there's a time for recording. Um, and kind of you have to go through this whole process in order to get the right stuff. And then, the amount of time to make it and the amount of decisions, it's just like if you're thinking that way, then you're actually thinking like you're limited to the amount of creativity that you have.
Right.
But if you actually like don't just like try to do it or change what you do, but you actually change the mentality and you're like, I'm a fountain. I can just create if I have constantly like the right people around me, and changing that up or working with the people that you really connect with. And that collaborative aspect is kind of seems like central to what I'm doing right now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's awesome, and then you're doing the tour coming up, right around the release day, start at the end of this month, and you have a pretty
Yeah.
big tour ahead. That's really awesome as well.
Yep, yep. We booked a big tour. We have a lot of like the major cities on it that we've been touring the last couple of years, but we have got left out like a lot of the major cities. So we're going to be kind of everywhere in the next couple months.
Exciting. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, for doing this and walking through all your work for the past, 2 decades plus. I mean, this has been such a cool, fun conversation. And again, I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely, brother.
Yeah. I have one more quick question for you, and I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Yeah, I think the thing that's the most important is like building your craft and your inspiration, and I think a lot of artists right now focus on how to get more followers and how to be, crush social media or make moves on social media, which all of that is like super important because that's the industry that we live in, and it's kind of it's kind of fucking awesome. you know, I like hired publicists for years and years to get on late night shows and whatever. And sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, and things happen. But I think the greatest thing that ever happened to me in terms of like marketing publicity is to walk into a coffee shop on a morning that I was having like a really tough day, and some kid is playing my song one day, and I just start singing with him. Someone films it, goes viral. Biggest moment, I have people to this day coming to my shows like, that's the video that I saw. That's how I know you're not king without a crown, not one day. Like, so, that's the world we live in, and like miracles can happen, like crazy things can happen at the touch of a button. You can make an inspired video or something, unique, and it can ripple, and it can be like awesome. And I think a lot of artists are focused on how they can, because I have kids, I have teenagers doing this right now. So they're like, focused on how they do that. And for me, it was like a whole different situation of like deeply listening to music and feeling inspired by it, and like letting it come into me, and then like figuring out how do I put it back out, and then like developing the craft, and then like performing at like open mic nights and in front of people, and you're not just in my bedroom, like, jumping around in front of like, the camera, or like, playing guitar, like really like actually like on the corner, on the block, like in front of like Fat Beats on 8th Street, like beatboxing for people, and like feeling how that works, like how to like change time and match people's flows and bring melody in, and like, you know, and it was fun for me. It wasn't just like sitting in a room and like learning a program, it was like, it was actually interactive. So my biggest, like, I guess what I would say to like, aspiring artists is to try to like find the artist in you, find the artistry, and really dig into that. And then you'll make a video and it'll fucking fly, you know? You don't have to make like 10,000, you'll make 10,000 videos trying to do something, a trend or something you saw, or even something real to you. But if you spent at those 10,000 hours working on your craft and just fucking doing whatever you know, explore, what do artists do if you don't know, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That's what I would say.